Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us tonight. I'm really, really excited for this one, today's talk by Becky, Off the Beaten Path. I think Becky has a beautiful slide prepared for her intro, so I won't say anything except that we are really, really fortunate to have you here today. And I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us. So I'll let you take over, Becky, and welcome.
Uh, Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation. It's nice to be here. I do have just a couple of introductory slides. First of all, I am currently the Senior Director of Consulting at Fusion Span. We're a technology partner to membership-based organizations, and we often work with the Salesforce ecosystem, but we have a very strong digital strategy web development component, often working with organizations who are implementing a Salesforce solution but need a marketing site or a public facing site as part of that implementation. I lead those engagements for Fusion Span. But my background really is as a writer. I started out life as a journalist, and I can't seem to shake that. That's kind of my passion. I've worked in association technology for almost 30 years now. And I really enjoy the nature of that work in the DC area. There's a huge percentage of the nation's nonprofits are located here. And so I've been very fortunate to work with many of them over time. I have real passion for customer journeys, and we're going to talk about that today. And also, I very much enjoy building customer personas and developing content strategy. And I am a little bit of a taxonomy junkie, so I will manage to work that in somehow. Just maybe one personal thing. Maybe I already got the segue to this, because if I had a dream job, it would be as a farmer. And I have just a few pets. I have a lot of dogs and some cats. So you're probably going to hear those throughout the presentation. I'll try to keep that to a dull roar. But really, the key topic I want to talk about today is what happens when our customers take side trips during their customer journey, how they get off the beaten path, how they deviate from sometimes the core purpose that we intend for them, and understand a little bit about the most common causes for that, and also talk about some strategies for how we can get them back on track, or at the very least make that side trip worth the trip. And before I go any further, though, I want to just ask if there are any questions, and ask if there's anything that that you wanted to add or say, Anita.
I think that's perfect. I think intro was great, and I've always been fascinated by the things you've shared about your passion, and I'm really looking forward to how that translates to the experience of drafting a customer journey, and so really excited about that. But I definitely want to ask if any others in who are here, if they have if they are here for something they really want to hear about, so that Becky, you could focus your talk around that a little bit. If we don't have any, then we can get started.
Awesome. Um, so, of all the things that we have in our toolbox as user experience professionals or design professionals, sometimes we manage to have the time and the bandwidth to develop customer journey maps. But even if we don't, that doesn't mean that there's not a journey taking place. And really, the journey is the process by which our customers um, reach their goals. And one of the things that has happened throughout my career is to understand that the path is not often straight when it comes to driving the experience of our users and helping to drive them to the primary purpose or value that we have for them. I don't know much about the organizations who are represented here. Some of us as web professionals have very concise, focused web presence. that allows us to really drive home very, few value propositions and drive people straight to our purpose, drive users straight to our purpose. Others of us, many of us, have very complex ecosystems of products and services, and we don't have complete control over all of the inputs and outputs, and that can lead people down some unintended or unexpected paths. And that's really what we want to talk about today. Before we get started, I just want to circle back and reflect on some of the things that I like to have in my toolbox when I'm thinking about the customer journey and when I'm thinking about how to make sure that users are staying on a path that we can anticipate and where we know we can deliver value and achieve success. Some of the things that I really like to hang my hat on are, of course, the primary personas. Secondary personas are great to have as well. These include not just the who, but also the what and the why and the how. Those people, those users who are coming to the site. Also, I like to define purpose and priority for the site. And I also really do strongly encourage my clients to keep those living, right? To make those living documents and living assets. I think that, and as Anita said in the chat, if you do have questions or comments, please type them into the chat or raise your hand. I don't want this to just be, me chatting at you. And I'll try to make sure I check in on the chat periodically. But customers often ask me if I'm going to do one thing, or if I'm going to do a couple of things, if I'm going to build a couple of tools, what should they be? Are personas more important? Are taxonomies more important? I would argue, I'm of the opinion that personas, understanding your personas of your audiences, and really having a true and honest decision with yourself and with your organization about the purpose of your site, the goal of your site, and the goal of your digital experience is the most valuable way to spend the limited time that we all have. So what about journey maps? Are those critical for us to talk about the journeys that folks are on? They're nice to have. I'd highly recommend that you work toward that goal if you don't have them today. But having said that, the journey really is everything that happens between the audience and between your purpose. And so I think that the value of the journey map is sometimes to help you dig more deeply into your purpose. And sometimes the research that goes into creating that journey map, the conversations that you have with your internal and external stakeholders, that's really the value of it. It may not be the asset itself that really delivers value for you. So in today's topic, sometimes we find our users and ourselves off track. Our users are taking paths that we didn't anticipate. They are, in some cases, they may be, we worry about them getting lost, but the question is, do they really feel lost? Maybe they are accomplishing something. They're just not accomplishing what we thought they were going to accomplish. I'm going to have to thank Anita for the great graphic today. And some of the most common side trips, or those distractions that we see with our customers at FusionSpan, and that I've seen throughout my career in the space, really do boil down to just a handful of causes. They're certainly not the only ones, but they're the ones that I see most frequently and that I thought we could talk about today. Obviously, other communication channels, ways that you are bringing people into and out of your digital spaces, drive the experience. That includes inbound marketing, which is in its nature very focused. And we'll talk a little bit more about what inbound marketing is and what it is not. Also, the idea that there's decentralized communication, you may have a lot of stakeholders within your organization um, driving traffic to your digital spaces, and you may not have complete control over that. So those are the types of things that can create unusual landing places for users, have users in side paths that you didn't anticipate. Also, special digital spaces for campaigns or for events or for other microsites can become very significant distractions, especially when those are short-lived, short-term, and often third-party platforms when users have to go outside of a particular space to perform a task or to complete a transaction. That's something that we see a lot with our web presences related to things like Salesforce interactions or other CRM interactions or learning management systems, even advocacy software solutions. Those are some of the most common things that that we see. And we're going to talk a little bit later about what I call an extended journey that can be the world's longest distraction, and some ideas for bringing people back into the fold. Some of the inbound marketing journeys that we see most common are things like blog posts. They're targeted content, they're personalized. You're working really hard to drive users to content that's interesting to them, to content that is dedicated for them. That's great. That's the goal, right? To get people to things that are going to engage them, that they value and that they want to engage with. So those are not necessarily bad things, but they also can be distractions from the core purpose of your site or the core journeys that you've planned. Perhaps you spent some time really understanding journeys as they exist for your users. You've invested in user research and determined what those most valuable journeys are. But all of these other campaigns, all of these other inbound marketing initiatives may be driving users in various places. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can result in some confusion around how you keep your priorities for your site. And it's really unusual that we have complete control over those. Most organizations have a fairly complex ecosystem of people who are impacting those journeys, rather than having it all be in the hands of a single stakeholder. We're going to talk again about some strategies for bringing those things into full focus and keeping the users back on the path that you intend for them and that really spell success for your site. Another area that often is the case is a culprit for journeys that are unexpected or that are deviations from your core purpose are decentralized communication. When you have a lot of stakeholders who are making decisions about their own priorities and their own initiatives and are executing on those. Maybe it's because you have decentralized decision making. Maybe you have decentralized communication platforms. Perhaps they have not been deconflicted against each other, and so they're actually competing and conflicting with each other. Maybe they're overwhelming your audience base with too much volume or with competing purposes that are driving users in various directions. And then it's also really hard to centralize some of the tools that we have in our toolbox for helping users to navigate to the things that are most valuable and have the most purpose, things like taxonomy and tagging and things like search engine optimization. When you don't have complete control, when you have a very decentralized communication channels, that can be very difficult to focus on those things. Another, I talked just briefly about campaigns and microsites. This is something that we see an awful lot in the space that I work in frequently. There will be, there's a primary digital presence that is strong, but there are a variety of campaigns, either advocacy campaigns or campaigns for upcoming events that are highly competitive for the eyes on the space. It can distribute your analytics and confuse your metrics when so many of those are popping up here and there. And oftentimes they are done in a fashion that's sort of haphazard because they're temporary or short-lived. It's possible that they need to be co-branded with other organizations because they're done in conjunction with someone else. And also a lot of, especially in the association space, a lot of time and money goes into marketing events. The same is true for things related to for the government space, where there are new regulations and guidelines. And, we've all just seen perhaps the biggest set of content distractions ever in how various entities and organizations have responded to COVID. So there are a lot of new web presences out today that are, focused on how organizations are dealing with COVID, how they are helping their customers deal with COVID, how they are responding to restrictions. And those are all things that we're competing with for primary purpose. No matter how critical it is, not everything, of course, many of them are not nearly as critical as what we've seen in the last year and a half, but they're a fairly frequent encounter for folks making side trips off of main sites. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have those. It's great to have the agility, the flexibility to spin up campaign sites and take them down. So not necessarily all bad, but certainly it's a side journey. It's a side trip. And it sort of splinters the intended purpose that we've spent so much time working on for our digital spaces. Really the last and maybe the biggest is those third-party platforms where users have to go outside of a digital space to perform a transaction, to get something, to have something, to do something that requires a third-party platform. And it can be very hard to work with those platforms, to work with those vendors to make a more streamlined experience. We'll talk through some of the sort of strategies for doing that. It also usually means that you're going to have to work with different product owners internally. It's not just a question of working with external vendors. Sometimes it's working with internal stakeholders as well in your organization or in your customers' organizations. So how are we going to retrieve these lost travelers, these people who have deviated a bit from our core purpose? And there are different strategies depending on the purpose or the reason for the side trip. I want to just pause here though before we jump into some of those strategies and ask if there are any questions or if any, hopefully some of this is resonating with some of you. Hopefully some of you have faced some of the challenges of these sort of distractions for your users and for your stakeholders. And anybody have any questions or comments right now?
I want to share one of my experience, Becky, and I definitely want to hear your response to that. So when I'm actually working on something where I have to, it's an existing, I would say existing like platforms, and we are trying to bring them all together. So when we're trying to design the journey map, we know that every platform will have its own journey. But then there's this whole idea of, we still have to do a journey map, which could be incomplete. And so there are these struggles that we probably know the path, but then how do we start about trying to accommodate or, how do we make it I know that we can't make it foolproof, but what are the precautionary or what kind of prep work can we do to accommodate those changes that may come or anticipate those, side journeys that may happen? Because obviously we don't know everything before we start anything, any journey map, right?
Right. And when you are bringing together platforms that have all existing expectations,
Yeah.
it can be very tough to, especially when you have a limited ability to really change or fundamentally change those things.
Right.
When you're bringing them in to a degree as is. For me, I always like to start back over and redefine my personas,
Mm.
um, and understand how each of those personas interacts with the individual platforms and then the commonalities between the two. Um, so I like to go back and sort of I think personas should be living and breathing
Mhm.
documents. I think they need to be constantly maintained. So that's my favorite way to kind of start over is consider how the audience is, consider them as a whole rather than try to marry them up, kind of start back at the high level. I also really taxonomy, I think gets sometimes it's often done after the fact.
Right.
Um, and I think that anytime you're trying to blend
Mhm.
um, content, whether you're trying to blend functionality or trying to blend products and services,
Mhm.
sort of revisiting your taxonomy and trying to kind of tidy it up a little bit,
Mhm.
clean it back up, maybe eliminate some of those categories and buckets of information. Probably those two things. Starting fresh.
Mhm. No, I like that. Personas being living and breathing.
I think that we go through these exercises sometimes, and especially in smaller organizations where maybe you've engaged a vendor to come in and help you do these things, but you don't necessarily have a plan for keeping them, for maintaining them in the future.
Mhm.
And for larger organizations, I think, personas, anytime you add a new product or service category, anytime whether you're adding a platform or um, whether you're removing a platform or a component of your digital presence, if you're adding a new channel, a new communications channel, maybe you're adding a new newsletter, maybe you're adding a new, um, a new outlet.
Cool. Thank you, Becky.
Sure. Um, just a little bit about about inbound marketing, and again, inbound marketing is typically targeted, directed content that has that gives the user focus. And but the fact of the matter is, not all of us have control over that inbound channel. So, in order to understand it, anticipate it, and plan for it, and to make it part of the journey, we have to engage our stakeholders. There, you know, many times we feel that our journeys are really, they live only in our digital space once a user gets there, but they start long before that. They start with the user relationship with the organization. They start sometimes as simply as with a what seems like a very insubstantial transaction, and with the communications that take place out of that. But they are part of they're part of our communication network. And that is a very big part of their journey, how we direct them. Whether we are trying to nurture a lead through a sales funnel and using landing pages on our site to drive targeted experiences, or whether we are pushing content because people have opted in to topics of interest. It's important for us to understand where all of those interactions are starting, and sometimes that does require us to work with other departments, to understand their priorities, understand why they are driving experiences the way that they are, and also to perhaps help them to navigate vendor relationships. Sometimes they may, they may struggle to embrace their technology platform. Those of us who are a little more comfortable with platforms and with those types of relationships can sort of help um, to navigate that. And then also, really understanding how to dedicate the time and the space on any of those in any of those channels um, for for setting our priorities. An example of that would be where we have inbound marketing campaigns or communication campaigns that are leveraging, maybe a marketing automation platform, encouraging those stakeholders to ingrain in their communication messaging some of the key priorities and value propositions for our core journeys, to sort of set a reminder and set a consistent tone. For campaigns and microsites, most of us, share control for those things. We don't necessarily have complete autonomy when it comes to those in our organization who are choosing to spin up new spaces and new properties. So again, understanding how the audiences differ for those, the life cycle and lifespan of those properties and campaigns, and then getting buy-in from those stakeholders who are responsible for those to sort of convey our overall priorities for our users, and how the things we have in common, the things we maybe don't have in common. And also to understand sort of the longevity of the space. How long are we going to, how long is this going to be active? And how can we plan to retire any cross-marketing or cross-promotion or cross-communication that we've created to account for it. Probably the biggest strategy is to sometimes just pick your battles. We've worked with a variety of organizations who've spent a lot of time, effort, and money trying to create a unified, cohesive experience for their journey, for their customers, only to find that they have various elements of their enterprise who have their own priorities, and are sort of constantly new sites and new experiences are springing up. Just almost it's like a game of whack-a-mole for some of these organizations. They really don't have a complete handle and complete control over how that happens. So if we have time, we can talk about some of the strategies for keeping users coming back to the core journey from, for example, microsites. But in the end, a microsite is a bit like a third-party platform, and sometimes those third-party platforms are, I'll give you the example. We just my company, we love tools. We just love them. Before you know it, somebody's acquired a new one. And for us internally, that can be a little challenging because we're trying to maintain one, and another one pops up. The same is true for your users. When you embrace a new set of functionality, it's you might find a very appealing and feature-rich platform or program for users to engage with you. But sometimes when that experience breaks down between one platform and the other, it can be jarring, and it can be a distraction, and sometimes it can take users outside of out of their core experience. And the key for me is always to come back to their experience, to kind of walk a mile in their shoes, and to make sure that anything that you're bringing online, anything that anyone in your organization is bringing online, that you have start to finish user experience testing and evaluation before that goes live, and that you sort of do that periodically so that you understand what users are encountering and where they may be deviating. And that goes beyond just testing. That's actually more of even just a high level experience of understanding what what they are seeing. Some of my favorite questions when I'm thinking about third party platforms is, what mood are users in when they are coming to the platform? Are they in a hurry? Are they rushed? Are they under pressure? Often a very common third party that we see are learning management systems where users are working to get credentials. And sometimes that's happening at the 11th hour when they are about to expire their certification. And so finding a way to get them what they need immediately is really their only priority at the moment. They don't really care if that digital journey that we've worked so hard on is honored. They've got to get that, they've got to get those credits. So knowing when to step in the middle and when not is valuable. When we think about our third party platforms, or even sometimes those campaigns are microsites, we have to think about anything that's the unexpected distractions for smaller organizations that are using freeware and platforms like Eventbrite or Sign Up Genius, or or some of the sort of more cost effective marketing campaign solutions. It's a little bit like it's like that movie Up, where the dog sees the squirrel and is completely distracted. Everything else goes out of their head. And I have this happen, to myself periodically. I know that you do too, when you see those ads that you don't have any control over. So understanding what your end users, what your other stakeholders are, how they're engaging. Maybe they're planning a series of webinars or sessions or informational experiences, and they're using solutions where you don't really have control over the customer journey. Again, just understanding the experience that your users are having, identifying whether the experiences are sort of pure. Do you have third parties who are pushing ads and promotions? Are there things that are appearing in your social posts that are taking users off of the journey and maybe even away from your organization, or in some cases even antithetical to your purpose or mission? Many times we do have to pick our battles. Sometimes it's necessary for us to accept that a journey is that the core journeys that we have are not necessarily that they have competition. So finding a way to share the spotlight is always something that we have to navigate. Understand there's maybe a delicate balance between what's a distraction and what we can live with, what we can live without. Again, it's like that, the learning management piece, the credentialing piece. If users are desperate for their credential, but that that means that we have a high percentage of our communication channels pushing users to go directly to the learning management system, and completely missing the journey that we laid out for them. We have to be prepared for that, and sort of striking a balance between the two. Asking, engage with your other external and internal stakeholders to try to find some ways that are consistent and that can be agreed upon to share the spotlight, to give references to your across the various platforms to your core value propositions, and also be prepared to back up your requests. I think that I'm not sure what's happening to my screen here. I mentioned this previously. Oftentimes, users are very transactional in nature. They come to a site, they have a very specific purpose. But for some users and for some experiences, their experience with your organization or with your digital space may extend for days or weeks. Learning, certification, credentialing is really the best example I can think of that. So constantly pulling users back to the organization, checking in with them, making sure that for those users that you're engaging with for that long journey, that you begin to know them, that you are giving them a sense of personalization and of sort of an intimate experience rather than sort of coming back fresh every time. And this may require you to, again, engage with some of your other communication channels to give them a sense that you are deepening your relationship and your engagement with them. So again, and I'm going to just kind of land here on this slide and open it up for some additional conversation, because I think the best discussions are the ideas around specific issues that you encounter. Just to kind of start where we left off with the previous slide, longer journeys often require you to regroup and sort of gather users back to you for your purpose, and to sort of create a progressive way of checking in and deepening your relationship with them. My very favorite tool for keeping users engaged across platforms and helping them to recognize the commonality of all of your experiences is really to maintain keywords and to maintain your taxonomy across platforms. That can be a huge challenge. It can be truly a Herculean exercise, and it really does require organization-wide feedback to create that organization-wide taxonomy. And then also to make sure you're leveraging your transactional communications, not just things like marketing automation, emails, and newsletters, but also every other touch point that you have, including things like transactional confirmations, receipts, pages, resolving pages, and messaging to bring users back to your core journey. Those are some missed opportunities for stating your value proposition and getting users back to your back on the path. I think that we have about 15 minutes, and I wanted to just open it up for questions at this point.
Anyone has any questions? I think Becky did a great job explaining. No one has any question.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, I do. I was thinking as you're going through these, Becky, because I mean, I've worked on a lot of like my user experience on the websites, and I've worked with a lot of microsites, and you do talk about the retention part. You do talk about engaging and how to bring them back to the main site. I'm just thinking, what does this because when it comes to the marketing, inbound marketing, and the things that you mentioned as a distractions or where people kind of go off, I'm thinking, does that does that apply to web applications or platforms as well, like platform experience or website? So I'm just thinking if it's similar things are applicable to that.
So I think that the events that that come back to my mind are definitely applicable. The need to execute on something quickly is usually a hallmark of something like a campaign site, right? It's usually more rapidly developed. Sometimes it means that you're deviating from your core platforms, and that there's a special and pretty intense communication effort around it. I don't think I'm answering your question though, Anita. Can you maybe restate again?
Oh, so I was saying, the more I listen to this, it seems more for the websites, where the journey kind of goes off track. Like, we're trying to bring back people through different means, and I love the strategy. But I'm thinking if this, the same kind of experiences or off track happens in application experience, like a web application experience or a platform experience.
Um, I can tell you that for our Salesforce implementations, it absolutely does. We often customize the end user facing portal of Salesforce beyond just what the staff user would see. And we probably spend as much time hiding things as we do showing things to keep users focused on the tasks at hand. And because solutions like Salesforce or some of the more complex learning management systems even are very, they have a lot of features, a lot of functionality, a lot of information. They can often, it's overwhelming for the user. So we use, we use a technique for hiding the things that we want them, that we want to bar users from doing, and then progressively introduce things as time goes on. So we will introduce it back slowly rather than sort of dumping it all on the users at the, in the beginning. What we find is true is that, when often when we're launching a new project, we are, the client, the staff user is really struggling to get that project launched, to support their other staff members, to support their users who are experiencing something new and different. And by hiding those things and by really simplifying the interface as much as we can, we allow them that time to adapt and to become used to the solution. And then as they are, as they begin to bring new systems online or begin to understand the product more themselves, we sort of open back up new functionality so that they can see it.
So in increments, I guess. Okay.
In increments.
Yeah.
It's, oftentimes people like shock and awe, right? Like they like to do it all at one time. And that's, so that's definitely we try to encourage them to slow roll it.
Cool. Well, I think we have a few more questions, but we'll be taking, I'll be stopping the recording. But before I do that, on record, I definitely want to say thank you so much, Becky. This was really helpful. And I'm still processing a lot of this. I think there's a lot of great details. So I'm still like processing like a lot of these things. And this is really helpful. Thank you so much. And we're going to take some more once I turn the recording off, because I think some of them are not comfortable having it on the record.
Sure. So if you want to turn off the recording, that's fine, Anita, but I did want to just add that it looks like there are people who are new to this work, right?
Right.
And so I think there's actually, I think that a lot of this is very focused on more complex enterprises that have a lot of different platforms and people interacting. But what I would go back to an early slide, which is defining your audiences, understanding your personas. There are a lot of good examples of how to build a persona and how to continue to develop that persona. And then forcing your organization through the exercise of understanding the goals and the purpose of your digital space, whatever you're working on, whether you're working on a client site, whether you're working on something internally, that can be a very loaded and difficult conversation. It forces organizations to deal with conflict. It forces them to answer some difficult questions about their real intent. Some organizations, they like to seem like they have this very altruistic and, beautiful vision. But at the end of the day, most of them do have a couple of things they absolutely have to do to be successful. And sometimes getting them to be honest about that and to define that purpose is the toughest part.